All right, so commonly misused words and phrases from the Elements of Style by William Strunk. So now we're on L. Less should not be misused for fewer. This is something that I definitely see a lot of, and it's definitely something that I'm pretty strong at. But I miss a lot of things also, like the however. I don't think I'll be able to sleep tonight thinking about that. No, it's not that bad. But less and fewer. It's kind of fun to learn this stuff, and it's all about countability. So he had less men than in the previous campaign. Nope, it's gonna be he had fewer men than in the previous campaign. And the reason why, and again, it's kind of fun. It's not about elitism. It's not about being smug and arrogant and never making mistakes. It's just about like you know, my grandmother always says, when you know better, you do better, and learning is no exception. So yeah, less. So if they're countable, it's less. I'm sorry. If it's countable, it's fewer. If it's uncountable, it's less. So I'll give you an example. He had fewer raindrops in his bucket in the afternoon than he did in the morning. Period. Uh, or he had less rain in his bucket this afternoon. Period. So either he had less rain in his bucket, because you can't count rain. It's uncountable. It's just like an amount, right? He had less rain in his bucket, period. Or he had fewer rain droplets in his bucket this afternoon, period. Um, or in, yeah. So because it's countable, um, so countable means fewer, and so fewer men, right? If it's uncountable, it's less. Kind of fun to know the distinction, but yeah, you heard it here. This is why I like. This is why this guy Strunk is such a legend. I mean, he's so called upon. I mean. Oh, and here, of course, here's where Strunk explains, probably even clearer than I do. Uh, Less refers to quantity, fewer to number. His troubles are less than mine. Means his troubles are not so great as mine. Okay, great. This is actually really, really good. So, less refers to quantity, fewer to number. So his troubles are less than mine. It means his troubles are not so great as mine. His troubles are fewer than mine. Means his troubles are not so numerous as mine. Yeah, it means he has fewer troubles than I do. The number of his troubles is lower than mine is. It is, however, correct to say the signers of the petition were less than 100. And again, here, looking at these commas just in general, this is what I love about these classic texts, is that their writing is right on. So it is comma, however, comma, correct to say comma, quote, double quotation, the signers of the petition were less than 100. And then comma, and with the quotation where the round number 100 is something like collective noun. That's what I love about good writing. That's what I love about classic texts, classic books. Is 99.9% of the grammar is correct. I mean, I don't know. Again, correct me in the comments. I could be way off, but I learn a lot. I learned a lot about you know writing and spelling and commas and periods and punctuation and all that stuff, sentence structure, from reading. And just your brain, it perceives a lot. You'll surprise yourself. You want to think well. You want to have a good relationship with your brain. I mean, I know it sounds hokey, but you got to have that good relationship with your brain. So yeah, so just it is comma, however, comma, correct to say comma. Okay, so less is thought of meaning a less quantity or amount. Okay, so now let's go over. So the signers of the petition were less than 100, right? Because it's a collective noun. The signers of the petition were fewer than 100. This is interesting. I think either one could make sense. The signers of the petition were fewer than 100. Well, 100 is sort of collectible. Collective noun. Interesting distinction. It sounds better the way he wrote it, obviously, and it makes sense. The signers of the petition were less than 100. That sounds a little bit better than the signers of the petition were fewer than 100. But he's saying that it is absolutely correct, saying less than 100, where the round number 100 is something like a collective noun, and less is thought of as meaning a less quantity or amount. Again, this is practice and experience and reading and writing. So, but yeah, I mean, and all of this adds up. Improving a shade in all of these arenas and phrases, it will add up to improved writing. And this is where your patience and persistence and practice comes into play. Using dictionaries, looking up words, patiently looking up, how to phrase things, where the commas go, thesaurus is, just patiently, taking the time, and not being in a rush. That's hugely important with regards to learning. Is being patient with acquiring the knowledge, and with patient with your brain in terms of interpreting it, and trying to remember it. So, all right. So, like, not to be misused for as. Like governs nouns and pronouns. Before phrases and clauses, the equivalent word is as. All right. So, left is bad, right is good. We spent the evening like in the old days. Generally pretty bad. We spent the evening as in the old days. Generally good. Hopefully this won't come up with regards to academic writing, but it's still important and, crucial to remember. We spent the evening like in the old days. We spent the evening as in the old days. This is tricky. I think a lot of even journalists, even respected journalists, might use this phrase. It's tough. This is where Strunk gets crunk with it. I mean, he's just good. The guy knows what he's talking about. I mean, he knows his stuff. So, he thought like I did. He thought as I did. He thought like me. He thought like I did. So he thought like I did is bad. I think a lot of people would use the left ones. So this is really helpful to learn. Don't misuse like for as. So we've all been using these phrases wrong. All right, the more you know. Okay, so line, along these lines. Line in the sense of course of procedure, conduct, thought is allowable, but has been so much overworked, particularly in the phrase along these lines, that a writer who aims at freshness or originality had better discard it entirely. Okay, along these lines. Mr. B also spoke along the same lines. Mr. B also spoke to the same effect. He's studying along the line of French literature. Again, it's pretty obvious. Along the line is extraneous. He is studying French literature. Being direct, Mr. B also spoke along the same lines. Again, when it comes to academic writing, to me, that's obvious that you don't include that. It's just fluffy, right? You're just adding words just to add words. You're talking just to talk. You might use that in dialogue and discourse, because what's fun in speaking might not necessarily be the best word choice or quote unquote fun in academic writing. So when it comes to academic writing, I'm pretty sure that most folks agree that along the same lines or along the line is not that's not, those aren't phrases that you want to use. You want to be specific. Along the same lines is not specific. You could say to the same effect if you were making, if you were adding a person to supporting a thesis that another person was a point that person was making. Okay, so literal or literally, often incorrectly used in support of exaggeration or violent metaphor. Again, I must come off like the biggest nerd known to man, but that's just hilarious. Violent metaphor. Hysterical to me. This is when he had too much rum or too much absinthe, and I just feel like it's hilarious. A violent metaphor. Like, really? A violent metaphor? Like, he's so mad. And, like, I don't like when people use literally. It's crazy. It's funny because this was like 100 years ago. And people now, there are still people now that it drives them batty, like different pet peeves. And one of people's pet peeves is like, don't like when people say literally. I don't think it's that big of a deal. when people are talking and all that. So, it takes all kinds. You've got to have a lot of different personality types. If everybody was like this, if everybody was like you, the world would be a boring place. Just remember that. But when it comes to the humor of, his role and his writing and his book and all this stuff, it's just hilarious. Often incorrectly used in support of exaggeration or violent metaphor. But he probably means also a violent a metaphor. So a literal flood of abuse. So that is a violent metaphor, right? A flood of abuse. A flood of abuse. Just say, but it's still kind of funny with him saying, it anyways. Okay, so literally dead with fatigue. It's a violent metaphor because it ends with death. Almost dead with fatigue. Dead tired. So yeah, he's just saying you don't have to use it. All right, so let's use the last L. Meant to be more emphatic than lose, but actually less so because of its commonness. Lose out. The same holds true of try out, win out, sign up, register up. With a number of verbs, out and up form idiomatic combinations. Find out, run out, turn out, cheer up, dry up, make up, and others. Each indistinguishable in meaning from the simple verb. Lose out is not. So, I don't know. Did he lose out to, you know, did he lose out to his competitor uh, because he didn't show up to practice? On making first string because he didn't show up to practice, period. Or a question mark. Lose out, I think it definitely makes sense when you're speaking. But he's saying, what, maybe in academic writing it isn't necessarily uh, the smartest phrase because of its commonness. And he feels strongly about these as well. I think it works fine, and it's very clear when it comes to speaking, but perhaps not in academic writing. You probably won't use this that much in your academic writing pursuits. But anyways, I'll see you guys next time, hopefully, when we do M, N, and O. Thank you very much.